This is Ben Allen from Allen CIO. I have one of my favorite repeat friends, Christopher Sundberg from Woodward, joining us today. Hey,
How's it
Christopher.
going? Good. Hey,
Nice.
Ben, how's it going?
Awesome.
Glad to be back.
Yep. So Christopher is our cybersecurity expert. He does cybersecurity with products for Woodward up in Fort Collins, and it's always fun to touch base and talk about what's going on in the security world. So why don't we start with ransomware? We got a new thing going on, Christopher. Bring us up to speed, would you?
Right. So recently in the news, there's been a couple of attacks against Honda and several other industries. Industries being like power supply vendors like NL or cities that have been affected by a particular brand of ransomware or a particular group of ransomware called ECANs. Dragos actually did a really good article about what ECANs is and what ECANs is not, and that's up on their website for anyone to kind of take a look at. But essentially, it really targets OT or operational technology systems or process control systems. It's pretty nasty when it gets into that kind of a system. It will bring your systems down, so it's always good to have your backups around that. There's also other components to it as well. It's using some kind of infection mechanism that makes it go pretty fast once it gets a foothold into your OT environment.
So tell me a little bit, you mentioned process control systems. For those of us in manufacturing in the front office, give us a little indication of what kind of systems are those?
Well, those are the systems that make you money. So those are their back-end systems where your product is going from raw material over to finished product. And those are usually controlled by a variety of systems. There could be smart systems that have processors in them or programmable logic controllers, PLCs. They will definitely be out there handling some of those systems depending on how big your line is. And typically those things are controlled or looked at via a human machine interface or HMI. That's also could be referred to as the fishbowl that gives you insight into the whole process itself. Typically those HMIs, they're running Windows or a variety of Windows operating system. That it makes it a little susceptible to some of these ransomware attacks because Windows is very popular as a target, just because the prevalence of the operating system and sometimes the hardness or the difficulty in patching some of these process control systems.
So, when I hear about ransomware, typically I think these are computers, the files all get locked up, you got to pay money to get the files back. Yep. Do they infect process control systems? And if they do, what happens to those systems? What does that look like?
Well, those systems might be impacted, and they may not be impacted. Usually they'll try to go after the soft targets or the Windows HMI systems, and you lose insight into your control, and you don't know how your systems are running. If they are, like the ECANS ransomware or another ransomware that's out there called Maze, M-A-Z-E, they will encrypt files, but they will also do something called exfiltration. And that exfiltration is getting files out of the process control network or the OT network into a command and control server, and then hold those files for ransom. Those files could contain IP or intellectual property. So they will kind of double their take, if you will. They'll ask for a ransom to unlock the systems, but also a ransom to return that IP files to you.
Got it. So tell me, who's gotten hit by this software? Do you know any companies that it's actually attacked?
Well, publicly, the Honda was one of the companies that was in the news recently. NL, which is a power provider, I believe in South America. And then there's been Fresenius. They do a dialysis system. That was another victim of one of these ransomware attacks. So that it's really indiscriminate about who it targets as far as which industry it targets.
But it's nailing manufacturers. How do you have any?
Yep.
Do you have any?
It really concentrates on the OT side.
Do you have any indication of how is it getting into these clients like Honda, which they must have tens of millions of dollars invested into security? Any indication as to what their entry point is?
It could be a wide variety of entry points. It could be malware delivered via USB. It could be VPN connection that had a what's called a RCE, or remote code execution vulnerability. And it could also be phishing. Humans are still the biggest threat to control systems or to internet security. Phishing is, that act of sending out an email or targeted email and then having a payload in the file on that email or a nefarious link that someone clicks and then infects or gets a foothold into your systems to trigger a campaign.
I think that's an excellent topic. Let's switch over to that for a moment, because it used to be you could tell a phishing campaign because they misspelled something and said that they were from Nigeria. But it's been changing. Have you been keeping track at all as to what's been the latest type of phishing attacks? What do they look like?
Well, deepfakes aren't just for Facebook memes anymore. That's probably the best way I can describe it. That kind of technology has actually been used to create ultra realistic invoices or stuff that appears to come from a reputable engineering society or a vendor as a attachment for an invoice. And it used to be that a lot of these phishing attacks, if they did have a document attached to it, would be like a Word document or an Excel document, which may have a macro-based payload that could download a ransomware or download a vulnerability or an exploit into a system. That's now increased to include PDFs. So the PostScript document format, the Adobe PDF reader, Acrobat Reader type documents, they can now actually host some of these vulnerabilities. So it's really good to know who you're getting these documents from. Once those documents are downloaded or opened, macro may run, and that would deposit the exploit onto the system.
That's really scary. The PDFs, that's right. A new thing. I hadn't heard of that a year or two ago. That it seems like that's again something we all trusted, and now you're telling us we can't. I'm right. Curious. Tell us about, if you don't mind telling us. This could be proprietary, so I apologize if so. But in Woodward, if someone gets a file like that attached to an email, what do you guys do as far as what's the recommendation from IT on what you're looking for and what they're supposed to do if they see something like that?
Well, it's really training. So a large company like Woodward, we do have the ability to actually have a button where we just send to IT an email. It'll actually package that email up from our mailbox, send it to IT. It's called the fish button. And basically, if you have a suspicious file, or suspicious message, you click it and send it. Another thing I do personally is I don't use the HTML rendering or the rich text rendering in my email client. I go straight to text. That enables me to actually take a deeper look into the hyperlinks that are behind the message. So if I see some kind of suspicious hyperlink, nothing will automatically navigate to it. I'll actually just look at the text file, which should give me enough information to see if it was a legitimate message or not. If I really need to have the nice looking version of that file, I can then make the decision to render it in RTF or rich text format or HTML. Got it. Nice. And you can look that up in Outlook, how to do that, or there's forums out there that will tell you how to do that. So it's a handy little tip to have. It's something I've done, since I first learned about it, that it just made sense. Yeah. So you've given us a couple indications of security precautions, things like being careful with USB drives, watching out for attachments. In general now is something. LinkedIn's another target, Ben. This is relatively recently. Big aerospace companies have been infiltrated by phishing attacks that had originated from LinkedIn, where someone will send like an opportunity through a private message. Someone will make a connection on LinkedIn and say, hey, take a look at this document. What do you think about this process here, or something like that? Doing some what's called social engineering. People open it up and they've infected their system. So LinkedIn is not, they don't screen files for malware or anything like that. It's like another email system. So again, only open from trusted sources. Got it. That's so wonderful.
I think really helpful. Again, a wonderful conversation today. Do you want to leave us with any last points, Christopher, in regards to cybersecurity and what you're seeing out there?
Well, it's it now that the pandemic and things are kind of getting back to normal. You need to kind of keep on your toes because as maybe some of the attacks have kind of gone have been lower. A lot of people have been probably retrenching and figuring out new ways to do exploits. Another thing too is Windows. The Windows patch count for June was the largest patch count in Windows history. I think it was like 130, security patches that they released, and I don't remember how many of them actually caused more issues once you deployed those patches. But there are some vulnerabilities out there in the wild that are particularly nasty on Windows. So just keep patching. Remember defense in depth, and make sure you have a backup handy of
Yeah.
your systems so you can do a restore.
Yep. Awesome. Hey, always a pleasure, Christopher. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you too, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful.